Hello and welcome to Knit and Matters episode 19. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Cheryl Lampard. I'm a style and image consultant with Style Matters International, and I've had two passions in my life, which is sewing and knitting. Knitting to me is therapy and it's my de-stressor, and I hope it is for you too. I used to own a yarn store in Brighton, England, where I would teach people how to knit and educate them on yarns, and it's my pleasure to do that again now. So I'm just going to take my seat here. While I'm doing that, the camera will turn to face the work table. And if you have any comments or questions as we go along, please put them in the feed or on this page. I can't see them while we're doing this, but I promise to get back to you as soon as possible afterwards. Okay, so I mentioned last week that Knit and Matters is partnering with our friends Mary Maxim. I took over their Instagram page last week, which was a huge privilege and a lot of fun. And I also wrote a blog for them. You can see that at blog.marymaxim.com. It's also on Knit and Matters Facebook page and our Instagram pages and Ravelry too. Now that's great for me, of course, but don't forget you benefit too. If you go to marymaxim.com and buy anything at all, enter the promo code Cheryl at checkout, and you'll receive 20% discount off the highest priced item. That's for any order you place today, tomorrow, whenever it may be, from anywhere you might be watching, because Mary Maxim does ship globally. As long as you enter that promo code Cheryl at checkout, you'll get your discount. So I think that's really exciting. Before we get on to part 2 of Entrelac, which is what we're talking about today, I want to talk to you about some common knitting errors and how to fix them. Let's start with something simple. This is a sample I did a while back, but look at these pulls here. Very easy to snag knitting, as many of you will know, and if you're using it for afghans or blankets or throws, these things can get caught on anything really, and I'm sure if you've got pets it's almost an occupational hazard. You might just have a loose bit of knitting somewhere. Again, it's pretty much the same fix, and it is very simple to fix, but if you don't know what to do, you end up doing the wrong thing and you make it worse. And the first thing is never ever cut these. If you cut it, then you've got a much more of a problem. So one of the things you might be able to do is just kind of ease that back, Already that's looking a bit better. Sometimes you get a loose stitch that looks like that. Well, here's what you can do. You can just kind of tease it along the row. Okay, so you can just tease it. You can do it with a toothpick. I'm doing it with my nice sharp needle, but you could do it with anything, a double pointed needle, anything, one of these little bamboo pins that are super useful. I don't know what they call those, but they're very useful in knitting. So now we've got another snag here, big one here. Again, I pulled these out deliberately so you can see. But one thing you need to understand is sort of how the stitch works, because otherwise you could be pulling and pulling, and then you're going to make it tight here and along the row. So the way the stitch works, it's almost like a sort of, the Greek sign for omega, that kind of letter that sort of goes like that. It sort of loops up and round. So although the stitch on the front is this V shape, the stitch actually loops round. So in this instance, it's kind of pulled from this V has pulled. So we want to pull that side. Now you can see there, if I show you that, this stitch loops round. That's the way the knitting works. That's the wonder of knitting and its knots and kind of loops. It's really a succession of loops, as I think we've said before. So you can just work along the row and tuck that in nicely. If a little bit of stretching and pulling doesn't do it, you can work along the row, and already you can see that's a vast improvement. And you might have to go right along the row to ease it back in. But if you're doing seams at the side, it's never going to show. So already, now if it's already on a blanket or something where you've already finished off the edges, again, I still advise you to just do a little bit of pulling like this, see where that's going to go, and then maybe ease along. You might not have to pull all the way along. See, magic fix. So you can do that with loose stitches too. Simple fix, but you need to know. Okay, let's look at another fix. So in episode 7, I showed you how to pick up drop stitches using a crochet hook or a spare needle or a little hooky device like this one, which I don't know what it's called, but it's meant to, it's almost like a crochet hook. It's meant for picking up things. So that's great if you're doing a piece of stockinette knitting, but what if it's a more complicated pattern? What if you've made a mistake in something like a cable pattern, as I have here? You will see that my cables are left-leaning cables here, and they are there, and then, oh my goodness, I've done a right-leaning cable. Now, if you have done, let's say this is a sweater, if you have done inches and inches of knitting, and you've got several hundred stitches on the needle, the prospect of pulling all that out is not much fun. That kind of pulling out, I may have mentioned this before, but it's called frogging. It's a nickname that knitters call it. You frog to where your lifeline is. We talked about those before. We frog to where the mistake is, and that name gets the point. It gets its name from the sound that a frog makes: ribbit, ribbit, ribbit. You're ripping it out. So you really wouldn't relish the prospect of pulling out and frogging several inches of knitting just because you've made a mistake in a cable. Now, depending where your mistake was, if it's on the sleeve near the seam, you might not want to worry about it. If it's on the front, which, you know, as luck would have it, that often is the way, the one mistake that you've made is on the front, you probably wouldn't want to put up with it. So here's a way that you can deal with it. You need to be a bit brave, especially if you're pulling out lots of inches. But you just keep your nerve. So what we're going to do, you're going to knit up to, we're going to knit up to where the mistake has been made. I've cut my yarn off here just so that it's not another ball of yarn in the way. Okay. So I'm going to knit up to where my mistake is made. And now I'm going to pull those 4 stitches off the needle. The important thing here is to just keep calm and carry on. So I'm going to undo the floats. So the threads now, or the thread that is forming the cable, we're calling those floats, okay? Just so you know what I'm referring to. So I'm just going to pull that out. Now this looks terrifying, I know, but I've seen it done for inches and inches of knitting, and as long as you take your time. So I'm just going to pull out to where the mistake has been made, that row where my cable is wrong, okay? And then the next thing I got to do is get those stitches onto a needle so it doesn't unravel any further. So I'm going to just be very careful. I'm going to put these here for the minute. As long as you rescue them, you can breathe. Okay. So what I want is for these to go the other way. Okay, this is what I wanted to get my twist. I know, it's lots of fingers here. Okay, so I've got, as you can see, I've got my 4 stitches. I've got the 2 that I need to twist on a cable needle, and I've put these other 2, and I've just split the stitch there, that's okay, on a double pointed cable needle. You could, if you don't have a double pointed needle, sorry, it's a double pointed needle, if you could use a cable needle, you could use a toothpick, anything that has got 2 points, because you need to be able to slide that off. Now what I'm going to do now, I need to twist these. So I'm going to have to find that first float. It's going to come off. Oh, okay. So I'm going to find that first float. This is where it gets fiddly. Oh, I've dropped them off. Oh well. We can always rescue these, she says. Here we go. I knew this would be awkward. Okay. Of course, when I was doing it last night on my demo piece, it was perfect. Right, I need to get these in a position where I can knit. And I'm going to use this, I think, Yeah, I'm going to use this. I'm going to knit these. I've got to get the right float, and I'm going to knit that stitch. This is I know this is really awkward to see. I know it's painful to watch, but this is, you'll probably do it better than I will, because I'm kind of leaning over so you can see. However you do it, you want to get that so it's going that way. Now, you're going to knit with the same float. You need to ease that. That's it. I'm going to knit those using that same float from there. Okay. It's a bit cack-handed, as my mother would say, but if you do it and you take your time, it can be done. Okay. I might have to do this again later. But that's what we're trying to do. So once you've got that cable twisted back in the right way and knitted your floats, oh gosh, I did it perfectly earlier. What a mess. Here we go. I can't see my stitch. Okay. My yarn is splitting. But that's the principle of it. And then you go up. My cable is now, my stitches, I can get them all back on one. I can do a better job of that, and so will you. But that's the principle of what you're doing, okay? You're picking up each float, so I just would need to ease that along a bit, okay? And then you would pick up, once they're back on the needle, you can knit each one up on the strands, okay? And I'll show you now. That's a lot easier when you've got them on the needle, without splitting all your yarn like I have, but just bear with me. Pretend I haven't split the yarn. I'm going into my next float. The trick is to make sure your floats don't get tangled up. I know this is going to look terrible, but I just want you to see what I'm trying to do. There we go. As I'm sitting at an angle and it's going very strangely. But that's the principle of it, okay? There you are. I know that was painful to watch, but that's the principle. And I've got 2 more floats because I'd unpicked 4 rows. So that's your cable back on, and then you would just carry on knitting up on those floats, those ladders. And then you can, just ease it along. Okay. Now, if I was doing that on a piece of knitting, obviously I would get that right and not split the yarn, but in the interest of time, I need to get rid of that. Now, let's get on, really, now with Entrelac, which is what we're here for. Just clear the decks a little bit over here. So, last week we talked about Entrelac knitting, which is the system of knitting, and I have to get this so you can see it. This is the piece that I did last week. And this is the pattern that we're following in terms of the stitches and what we're doing. And I'm going to bring that in a second. Okay. The French, I want to recap on this because it is quite a complicated bit of knitting. Although having fumbled with that cable, I can't think it's any more complicated than that. It comes from the French word entrelacer, to interlace. It's a basket weave pattern of triangles and rectangles, which are positioned diagonally. Excuse me 1 second. Excuse me. This is a free download from Mary Maxim for a scarf. I'm using a different yarn. I'm using a chunky yarn here because I wanted to show you how it works. But I am using the same amount of stitches, or I have used the same amount of stitches here. Obviously, I haven't knitted a scarf. I've just done a portion of it. And what we did last week, we did the base triangles, which are along here, the base triangles. We did the tier 1 left side triangle, which is here. And we did the tier 1 rectangles, which are going this way. Essentially, we did everything that's on the first page here. now what we have to do, I want to show you the right side triangle, and I'm going to show you here. That's what we're doing next as we go over to the next page, which we'll do in a minute. But let me just show you what I'm doing. So this is a sample piece. If I overlay it, you can see here are my base triangles. I've just done half the amount of stitches. Here are my base triangles, okay, along here. Then I've done my tier 1 rectangles going this way, and we pick up the stitches and we go this way. Now when I get to this end, I have to do my right side triangle, and then we're going to do rectangles going that way. Okay, so if I overlay that, you can see that that's what I've done. I'm going to switch now to the sample, a bigger sample that I've done, because I think it's a bit easier to see. Again, if I overlay that, you can see I've done both of the tiers of rectangles. So let's say I now want to finish this off. You know, I've done my 71 inches or however long my scarf is going to be, or whether you're doing a headband or whatever you're doing with it. At some point you're going to want to finish off. So that's essentially what we're doing now. But to do that, we've got to do this right side triangle. So what I'm going to do now is essentially, let me match that up to where this would be. It's another one of these. It's another one of these. That's what we're going to do now. And I'm going to take that off because I need that needle. I will just move this purple piece of knitting out the way because I want you to see what I'm doing, and I will swivel myself so you can see my hands. I'm just going to bring the pattern in. We've done the first page virtually, so we're going on to the second page. Now, one word of advice here. I do think the pattern needs a word of explanation here, because it says on the right side triangle, you're on your wrong side, which I would be. I'm going to start this way. This is where I'm starting. But it says pick up and purl 6 stitches along next edge. What's meant by that is the selvage edge. It's actually more obvious here when you get up to here than it was down there. Because you're thinking, well, where do I go? But you're actually picking it down there on the selvage edge. So this is the edge we're picking up from. Okay. So I'm going to show you how to do that. I do need to keep the pattern there, but I'll try and keep it out of the way so it's not in the way of the knitting. So I've got to pick up and purl 6 stitches along. This is our right side triangle, but I'm on the wrong side. So I'm going to pick these up. 6, I want 6, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's good. I can do that. And remember, where it says you slip, if you're slipping stitches, you're going to slip them purlwise. Unless it says otherwise, you're going to slip all the stitches purlwise. 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm actually going to go, yeah, I want to get those. I'm going to go 6, so I've got my 6 stitches picked up there, okay? This is where I'm going to need my counter. Remember, that's your most important little tool in some way when you're doing this. So now, that's my first row. So now I'm going to slip. I'm on the right side now. I do turn, slip purlwise, and I'm going to knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's my second row. My third row, I slip, I purl 3. 1, 2, 3. Then I purl 2 together. Row 4, sorry, I slip 1, purlwise, remember, and keep the yarn at the back. You're keeping the yarn at the back when you slip purlwise. and I knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't forget to click your clicker. Slip, purl 2, purl 2 together, turn, slip 1, slip 1, knit 3, 1. On this one you're not actually joining onto the next triangle. You end up with a sort of little standalone piece, which is just what you want. Slip 1, purl 1, purl 2 together, but you are making it smaller. You're making a triangle, not a rectangle, remember. We're on row 8 now, which is slip 1. Oh no, we're on row 9. Slip 1, purl 2, purl 2 together. That's why you need to use your clicker, which I did. I just misread the number. Now I'm on row 10, which is slip 1. Oops, not right off the needle. Knit 1 and turn. And row 11 is purl 2 together. Okay. Now, that is one triangle completed. And for the next row, I'm going to show you now how to do your end triangles. So when you've done your however long you want your piece of knitting to be, you need to finish this off somehow. Let's imagine that that is inches and inches of my knitting, and now I'm ready to finish it off. You must end with that right side triangle once you've repeated your tiers 1 and tiers 2. 1, 2. So base triangles, tier 1, tier 2. We did a left triangle, we've done a right triangle now. So after you've done the right triangle, you can do your end triangles. To do that, this stitch needs to go back on the right hand needle. And what we're going to do now, we're going to pick up, we're on the right side. I'm going to pick up and knit 5 stitches. This stitch on my right hand needle is going to count as 1 stitch. So I'll end up with 6 stitches on my right hand needle. Excuse me. 1. So I'm going to go, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go in here. So I'm going to pick up 1. The first one's always a little difficult. There we go. 1. I'm going in that sort of 2 legs there. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. I've got 6 stitches on my needle. I'm going to set my counter back to 0. Excuse me. Now I turn to my wrong side and I purl 6. So this is actually row 2 because my first row was the picking up the stitches. It's quite fun casting off these actually. It's not the same as the other rows at all. So row 3 will be, I do slip, slip, knit, and if you remember how to do that, slip them both onto the right hand needle, put the left hand needle that way, and you're knitting basically into the back of them. Okay, then it's another knit 3, 3. Now you're thinking I've got to slip, slip, knit again, but where do I go? Well, you slip this one and you slip this one. Okay, you're going to be knitting off these pieces too now. Takes a bit of getting your head around that sometimes. 1, because you know I've got no more stitches left, but you're going into the next rectangle. 3, 4, 5, So I'm on row 5 now, and for row 5 it's slip, slip, knit. Sorry. Of course I would choose a really splitty yarn to do this with. Hey ho. Oh gosh. There we go. Slip, slip, knit. Knit 2, knit 2. Slip, slip, knit. Remember, slip, slip, knit. So you were taking it off the rectangle that's next to it. That was row 5. Row 6, I pull 4 and turn. It's not a standard way of casting off, but it's quite fun because you're shaping it as you go. Row 7, slip, slip, knit. I knit 1, I slip, slip, knit. Now I'm on row 8, so I pull 3, 1, 2, 3. Row 9 is slip, slip, knit. It's slip, slip, knit, slip, slip, knit. And slip, slip, knit again. Okay. Row 10, I pull 3, 1, 2, 3. Row 11, I slip 1 knitwise. This is the only time I slip 1 knitwise. The yarn is at the back. Slip 1 knit 1, slip 1 knitwise. Yarn is at the back. Slip, slip, knit. Okay, and you pass the slip stitch over. You do not turn. Okay, and then you repeat. So this 1 stitch is on your right hand needle, and that's where you keep it, and then you pick up 5 more along there. So that becomes stitch number 6, and you complete another end triangle. So your end triangles are like that. And if I bring back the purple piece of knitting, you'll see that they all finish beautifully. You just basically, whoops, sorry, dropped my clicker on the floor. Chaos. So you can see, I gotta move this so you can see. That's exactly what I did there. Then I'm going to be picking up 5 more stitches along there. I'm going to finish that end triangle. And so on and so on. And that's how you would finish off your scarf or your entrelac knitting. Unless your pattern said otherwise. Okay. You'll get used to doing it. It's fun to do. It's a different technique, but I really like entrelac knitting. Okay, so, now next week, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to be doing a project next week. I'll have knitted it up during the week, and then I'll show you how to do it next week. And this is what we're going to be doing. It's called a Lioch shrug. It's a really fun little garment. It's one of those lovely little shrug things that you wear that's got sleeves. It's super easy to knit. It's a little kit from Mary Maxim. You'll need a nice pair of, you'll need a big fat circular needle. The needle that you need is a 32-inch circular. It's size 19, which is a 15 millimeter. You're not going to be knitting in the you're not going to be knitting in the round. You're going to be holding 2 strands of yarn together. So you need that size needle to hold all the stitches. I'll post the link to this afterwards, but I'm going to knit this up during the week. Then you can see what it looks like when it's finished, and I'll demonstrate how to do it. It's super easy, so it's a nice little thing to make for yourself, or maybe for gifts. It's the time of year, start thinking, unbelievably, but you probably need to start thinking about holiday gifts and things like that, and what you might want for you. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed episode 19. There was a lot in that. But remember, you can look at the replay again and remind yourself of how to do some of these things. This, as with all episodes, are on our Facebook Knit and Matters page. They're uploaded to our YouTube channel. And where else? We're also on Instagram. But this doesn't get loaded to Instagram. And Ravelry, don't forget as well. So I'm here to help. Feel free to ask questions during the week at any time. Be happy to answer them. Don't struggle with your knitting. Let me help you if I can. It'll be my pleasure to do that. So between now and next week, stay well, stay calm, keep knitting, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye now.